Welcome to Adapt Rochester as we explore doing our first program at Hope Hall.
Hope Hall School is a private, non-sectarian, not-for-profit school designed for students in grades 3 through 12 who have special learning challenges that are not being met in the traditional classroom setting. We believe that when students are given respect and enough time in a supportive, multisensory learning environment, they can become successful learners. Our nurturing, supportive, creative atmosphere encourages students to take risks in learning and helps them reverse the cycle of academic failure.
This is Will Cowan from Adapt Productions. We're now in Rochester, New York. Disability is everywhere, and solutions to disability problems are few and far between. But we have a person here who has found some amazing solutions to the problems of children who have disabilities in the learning capacity, and I want to introduce her. You are Sister Diana, is that right?
Yes.
Dolce?
Dolce.
Dolce, okay. And what is this place called here?
This place is called Hope Hall, and it was named by our children.
Okay. And now you work with children that have problems in learning, right?
Yes.
How is your approach different for students who have difficulty learning from conventional teaching methods?
That's a great question. Well, it's, the children at Hope Hall have something called an auditory processing delay. That means they can hear everything, but the part of their brain that makes sense out of it does it differently. Many of our children have anxiety disorders. Some of our children have attention deficit disorder, and some of our children are on the autism spectrum. One of the things that we do differently is that we look at both their academic development and their social emotional development, and we teach both, because what I call affective learning, in other words, how they feel about themselves as a person, is equally as important as how they feel about themselves academically. And if you don't work on both together, our children are kids that have been taught early on that they can't learn. So helping them to believe in themselves as learners is part of the problem. Then we have a small class. Well, lots of schools can have small class. But what we do is involve all of the senses in the learning. If in most traditional classrooms there's a particular pace that gets set, and a lot of the instruction is delivered verbally. If you've got an auditory processing delay, that makes no sense. So we incorporate all of the senses in the learning. We break things down into small sequential chunks, and we immediately evaluate how much of each chunk did the student learn. If they haven't learned it at least to an 80% level, the teacher applies something called instructional correctives. In other words, we fix what they didn't learn right then and there, so that the new learning that we introduced is always built on a solid ground. And the kids know that if they have an assessment and they do the instructional correctives, they know that we'll give them a reassessment, and they get the second grade, not the first grade. So there's success building on success. And with that strategy, the kids see themselves getting good grades is one thing, but more importantly, they're understanding the content. So as the year goes on and the content gets more difficult, the students have the learning base that they need in order to build on those difficult concepts.
So as they learn, they get they get patted on the back, so to speak.
That's right.
Yeah, they feel better about themselves.
That's right.
Oh, good, good. Now you have some programs here now. Optimism you talk about, like you want them to say, "How was your day?" And you say, "No, no, no." And what is that all about?
Okay, so over the year we teach values to our children, and one of the values is the value of optimism. Many people, including parents and adults, are always used to looking at what's wrong. And some of our children, prior to coming to Hope Hall, their parents will say, "How was your day?" Well, if it was a bad day, they're used to saying it was terrible or we had a bad day, or they go, "Yeah," you know. What we want the kids to look at is what was right. Even if you had a problem, was the problem solved? How did you solve it? Can we celebrate that? What went right today? So with our parents, we do a parent workshop in terms of if your kids come home and they start telling you 3 things that went wrong, listen to them, let them tell the 3 things that went wrong, and then say, now tell me 3 things that went right. Because that forces the kids to look at their day and evaluate it as a whole. Many times our kids have an hour bus ride to get home, and in that course of that hour, they're tired, they're aggravated, somebody could have them upset, that could ruin their whole day. They come home, their parents say, "How was your day?" They say, "Terrible." In reality, they may have had a very good day. So just teaching them to look at not everything is bad and not everything is negative is a skill. We teach the children the difference between tolerance and acceptance. We teach the children what hospitality means, what sacrifice means. We teach the children the meaning of empathy. And every child in this school can spell these values from the 2nd grade through the 12th, and people will say, well, what's the value in teaching them how to spell it? Well, if it's a word that they know how to spell and they know the meaning of it, then they're going to use that word
Good
even
point.
in their own writing.
Good point.
It becomes part of their everyday vocabulary. The virtue of prudence is something that we teach the kids, and they know the difference between being prudent and being impulsive. And they can recognize when they get themselves into a little trouble, they'll say, "Sister, I was being impulsive. I didn't think first." And that puts it into a perspective in terms of, I'm not a bad person, I was impulsive.
Now, you also work with the parents on this.
Yes.
Now, have you ever, some parents I've noticed have conditional love on their children, and I don't think that's a good use. How do you correct that with the parents when you work with them?
That's a good question. Many of our parents who have conditional love of their children were, as children, conditionally loved themselves. So in their reality, they don't know that they're putting conditions on their children's love because this is the way they were raised. And the chances are that their parents were raised that way also. So it becomes sort of like, doesn't everybody do it this way?
Yes.
So within our workshops, and we run several of them, giving our parents different strategies in terms of how to talk to their children. Many of our parents have grown up were in environments where cursing is normal. So they don't realize the impact that has. Or saying to their children something like, "How can you be so stupid?" The impact that has on their children. So these are all things that when parents learn that there's a different way of doing it, and we also start helping the parents to feel good about themselves. Our school counselors will also work as a counselor for our parents who can't afford counseling, and will help them to believe in themselves too, because they come pretty battered.
That's a very good point. Now, you also mentioned goodness as one of the things that you teach.
Yes.
And you said all religions, all backgrounds, the children are loved. And you have to stress that again and again.
That's right. A couple of years ago, and I realize I might be treading on political waters that I don't.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right, good.
Be my guest.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, when there were all the signs, "Make America Great Again," and that was being defined, there was a women's march. And I happened to turn the TV on one Saturday morning when one of the stations was covering the Women's March. And there was a woman who looked to be, I want to say maybe in her 60s, who was holding up a sign that said, "Make America Good Again." And I began thinking about the value of goodness, and when do we hear people talking about that? And when do we start looking at that? If we could hold as a premise that every person was born good, and that life teaches people to either act out of that goodness or not. And if we began to look at every parent as wanting to care for their children, are there parents that make mistakes? Yes. Are there parents that do things that are wrong? Absolutely. And I'm not saying that every person who makes a mistake, it was because of their parents. But I'm saying, can we look at each other with different eyes? When we start helping our children to look at each other with different eyes, they can move toward the acceptance piece, and that's when a lot of the name calling and bullying stops, because you have a basic attitude of this person is good, so why would I hurt them? And that's done a lot in terms of, we don't have bullying here. Our children have all been victims of bullying. They could all tell you what it feels like, but they don't bully each other here.
Oh, very good. Now, you also, I noticed, have violence, an anti-violence, peace, non-violence interactivity.
Yes.
That was one of your eightfold, very similar to Buddhism. You have an eightfold path.
Yes, yes. Our definition of violence is anything that harms or threatens to harm a person's body, feelings, or possessions. So at our school, name-calling is an act of violence. Gossip is an act of violence. Spreading rumors is an act of violence. The kids we do all kinds of things with social media and with the parents about social media in terms of things that get posted. Our teachers know that this school is a no gossip zone. Now, can I legislate? No. But can I deal with it when it happens? Yes. Those kinds of things, rumors, gossip, pettiness, becomes like a toxin that goes through the entire community. So in terms of violence, we start right off in September looking at, when I say to the new kids who come in, we usually get between 30 and 35 new kids every year. And I say to them, can you tell me what violence means? And they right away say guns and knives. And I start then with some of the other kids who have been here will smile. And I say, will somebody share our definition of violence? I really look at the way life has become so devalued in our country. And children thinking it's okay to go in and shoot people because there's so little value to any life. Young people killing young people for drug money. People shooting other people as a way of solving problems. Domestic violence. All of this is because life has been devalued. And so for me here at Hope Hall, we're going to start at the core, which is you look at the good, you believe in the good in yourself, and this is the bottom line in terms of how we handle violence, and it's not tolerated here.
Now, speaking of things not tolerated, you're an unplugged zone. Now, what does that mean?
Okay, an unplugged zone. When students come to Hope Hall, every one of them who has electronics, whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or a cell phone or whatever it is that they're bringing, they all have a Ziploc baggie with their name on it. They will come in from the bus, their electronics goes into the bag. The bags all go into a box, they get locked in the main office. When the buses are called at the end of the day, the kids on their way out to the bus, they come, they take their electronics out of their bag and they can have it on the bus with them. There is no electronics during the school day here at Hope Hall. Our children are focused on the learning, they're focused on interacting socially with each other, they're focused in terms of relationship building with each other and with the teachers, so there's nobody plugged in. And the teachers may not text during their class time to each other or to other people either, unless it's an emergency. And everybody knows that. I had the experience of working with a school near here, and one of the teachers were asking for some support, so I was giving a workshop. And one of the things that they said was, we can't get the kids to begin to listen. They're outside in the hallway texting each other. They're talking to each other on the phone. They're not coming in because they want to finish their conversations, which might last the entire period. And I said, well, who's stopping them? And And there's no policy set in other places for this is not the way we're going to do it here. Our parents all sign off on this policy and the kids all sign off on this policy, and everybody knows that it's fair because everybody's getting the same treatment. The kids know that if there's an emergency and they need to contact their mom or their dad or their grandmother, they can do what everybody used to do 15 years ago. They can come down to the main office and ask to use the phone.
Very good. But you do use computers.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The unplugged is just with their own personal electronics that they come in. We have children, we have laptops in every room, we have smart boards in every room, we have the regular computers, and both in the lab and in the classroom. So it's not unplugged from use of computers. It's unplugged from the social media access in terms of texting and everything else that goes on to distract the learning.
Okay. Now, let's see, we'll finish up here, though. Now, one of the other things I want to mention, spirituality, search for greater meaning.
Yeah.
Now, how do you work with students from different denominations, or Muslim or Buddhist or something like that, Jewish?
Good. Well, I am a sister of St. Joseph, so I am obviously Catholic.
Right, right.
I want to say that that's where it stops. This is a completely non-sectarian school, and the kids know from day one that there's one God and that everybody approaches God differently. And a religion is simply a way of approaching God and connecting with God. So we teach the kids about Ramadan. We celebrate Hanukkah. We celebrate Advent. And the kids know when we have a community gathering each morning, and that's when we do some of this character development. The kids know that if somebody is stressed or worried about something, they can come in and ask the community to pray. The way we do it is I'll say, does anybody else know somebody who could use our prayers? And the kids raise their hand and they say whoever they want to pray for. I will verbalize the prayer. I always speak only in terms of God. And the kids know that I'll say, at the close of the prayer, I'll say, Dear God, we ask this in your name. Whoever wants to be included gets to say amen. Now, I have a couple of our high school students who are struggling with the whole issue of religion and the issue of God, and they've come to talk to me about it. And they have said to me, Sister, I have a hard time believing in God. And I said, well, that's where you are right now in your journey. I said, but the fact is, God's not going to give up on you. I said, have you ever been angry with your parents? Yes. Have you ever not wanted to talk to them for a while? Yes. Are they still your parents? Yes. That's how it is. Right now, you're not believing in God. That's okay. God's not going to give up on you, and if you want to talk more, we can do it. So they said to me, well, what about the Pledge of Allegiance, where it says one nation under God? I said, you'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and when it comes to one nation, you can stop, and then indivisible with liberty and justice. I said, but I want you to continue to have a conversation with me, because this is a search for you. And when you come to the point where you feel that the search is finished, that's when we can end the conversation, but it's just beginning. So I want them to know that there's no judgment, that I'm not going to judge them or force them into anything, because that's not what God would want. God would want the gentle approach in terms of building a relationship.
Now, you've had some major success with students. Could you give us one or two examples of that?
Yes. Just this past Saturday, I went to the graduation from Monroe Community College of one of our students. It took him 3 years to get a 2-year associate's degree, but that was because he was working part-time. He studied criminal justice. His original goal was he wanted to be a police officer and maybe an FBI agent. On Saturday, he shared with me that what he really wants to do now is he wants to study law. He's got a scholarship to attend a law school, and his goal is now to become a judge. And I said to him, his name is Sharon, I said, Sharon, why did you change your mind? He said, Sister, because I want to be a judge who can really practice justice. And so I celebrated that. We have, I can say that all of our graduates are either attending school, attending apprenticeship programs, or fully employed in terms of work. We have children who last year, before coming to Hope Hall, missed most of the school year because of anxiety and school phobia, who this year have an almost perfect attendance record. The most they've missed is 5 days. We have children who never wanted to get on a bus to come to school because school was so painful for them, who are attending. I'll tell one quick story of a little boy on the autism spectrum who is new to our school this year. I've got thousands of past stories, but I'll keep it current. And he is a young 11-year-old. In other words, he started school a little early. So he was in the 5th grade, and his district at the end of 5th grade sent everybody to middle school. Now he's short, he's on the autism spectrum, his math and reading levels were at a 2nd grade level, and he's young, and he presents himself as probably somebody who is 7 socially and emotionally. His mom pleaded with the district not to send him to middle school, that he was not ready for it. He wasn't ready for it socially, he wasn't ready for it academically. The district's response to her was, we don't hold anybody back because it'll do something to their social emotional growth. So first day of middle school, this little boy was stuffed into a locker by some 8th graders, and it was a maintenance man who heard him pounding and crying on the locker door to get out, because of course he couldn't get out himself. He had wet himself, he was so upset and so nervous. Now I want to say to that district, you tell me what that did to that boy's psyche. So the mom came the 2nd day of school, told me this story and said, sister, please can he come to your school? The 3rd day of school was Friday. We had him come and visit on Friday, because all of our kids visit before they come, and we were going to fast track this whole process. His mom came to pick him up at the end of the day. He came bounding down the stairs from the 2nd floor. He got to his mom. He put his hands like this, and he said, Mom, thanks be to God I found a place where people like me. That's a success story. And shame on that district. Shame on the attitude that people don't get what they need. They get everybody gets the same.
We're running out of a little time, but I want to give, let's see, this is something you wrote. Hope Hall will expand to meet the unique learning needs of greater students who are unsuccessful in traditional educational setting. Hope Hall will be recognized as a model for educational reforms.
Yes, that's our goal. And within the next 2 to 3 years, I will have a manual put together that if there are other schools in other states, other cities, other districts who want to use our model, we can train them, we can license the model, and this can expand, because if it works here, it can work anyplace.
Oh, okay, now I want to, just for us, see, you are on 1612 Buffalo Road in, is it Rochester?
Rochester.
Rochester. And your website is http, hopehall.org, right?
Yes, and the zip code is 14624.
1462. Oh, one thing I forgot, woodworking.
Yes.
Spoiler alert, I have a master's in industrial arts. And what is the point of the woodworking?
When we first started our high school, before it actually opened, I went to every business owner in the Gates Chile area, and I said, what are the skills you are looking for from high school graduates? To a person, these men said to me, sister, we can teach the hard skills. I can teach somebody how to weld. I can teach somebody how to work on masonry. I can teach somebody how to do construction. We can't teach the soft skills. We can't teach group problem solving. We can't teach building relationships that are healthy. We can't teach team building. We can't teach any of those things. We don't have the time. If you could work on that. So there were 2 really good woodworking teachers that had worked at another agency, and that agency decided to, opted to change their whole approach towards woodworking and work more with adults. So these teachers were available. and I said, I'd like to open a wood shop. Working with their hands on wood and creating products that they can take home does so much for these kids' self-esteem. We incorporate math, we incorporate science into the woodworking. Every one of our children learns how to do mechanical drawing, not by computer, but by hand. And then they take those mechanical drawings and use those models to create something. They know the difference between craftsmanship, which means one person working on one product, and mass production, where everybody has a specialty and they can mass produce a product. They participate in the inventory, they participate in the selling of it. It doesn't mean that all of our kids leave going into woodworking, but it does mean that they have all the skills that they need to be a competent worker wherever they are. And in the meantime, they've taken home some wonderful products. There's no birdhouses here. It's all useful. There's chests, there's chairs, there's rocking chairs, there's cabinets. It's all those kinds of things.
Very, very good. Well, is there a last couple words you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
Well, one of the things I want to say is thank you for taking this time. Thank you for taking the interest in our school. Thank you for being willing to tell parents in other places not to give up hope.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
You're welcome.